what else would make a belief religious? I mean, in one sense, we would say if it has to do with God, that probably, in most cases, we categorize that as religious. What else can we say makes a belief a religious belief?
Sorry, I'm talking.
No, that's all right.
When your life is devoted to the outcome of you believing in whatever you're believing in.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good way of pointing it. We might say it's, we might call it an ultimate belief, right? This is very important to me. I'm committed to this. Which again opens the door for other things than the traditional religions to be classified as religious. I mean, if I'm deeply committed to something, but it's not Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Sikhism, many of the ones we're looking at, again, pull the Jedi card out. Right? I'm not kidding. In the Czech Republic, you can list Jedi as a religion on governmental forms. Right? And so the idea is I'm deeply committed to the beliefs and ideas. Please don't anybody convert to Jediism out of this class. But the idea of the beliefs and principles found in the Star Wars films of the interconnection of all beings and detachment from certain concerns and all these kind of things that are philosophical principles, but people that would claim to be Jedi in a honest way, right? I mean, they're not joking. They seriously are committed to these kind of things. I mean, it's different for that than, let's say, the Pastafarians. Do you know who the Pastafarians are? All right, some of you do. One or two of you. Followers of the great flying spaghetti monster and his newly appendages. You don't know about the Pastafarians? Right, Pastafarianism developed as essentially a social critique on religions, and so most of the founders were atheists. But essentially, the idea was, in certain places where religion was kind of being promoted in public schools or something like that, well, what's the difference between believing in God and believing in a giant flying spaghetti monster? And so that's the whole point. Well, it's kind of been taken to the point of people pushing for religious exceptions based on their commitment as being a Pastafarian. So, for example, in Australia, there was a case a couple of years ago that in official, like a driver's license or something like that, you're not allowed to wear any sort of headgear. But there is a religious exception, right? A woman came in wearing a colander. Somebody came in wearing a colander, right? Spaghetti colander, right? On their head, wanting to have their picture taken because they were a Pastafarian. And they decided to let them do it, right? And that's been done in the United States. And now, is there a difference between wearing a colander on your head and being a woman wearing hijab? Well, from a governmental standpoint, from a civic standpoint, the government, in a separation of church and state, has to say, yes. But the Pastafarian, do they really believe they need to wear a colander on their head? Probably most don't. Right? But yeah, it's more of a satire religion, or it's a commentary on religion. Now, maybe at this point, or maybe in a couple generations, there will be committed Pastafarians. Unlikely, but possible. But we would say, that's the difference between a deeply held belief. Right? I don't think Pastafarianism has been recognized by the IRS yet. But that's kind of the next step of, where you go with it. But, this idea of deeply held beliefs or beliefs about ultimate concerns, right, those are the kind of things we say. That's a religious belief versus, I believe in the importance of representational government, right? I believe in democracy, or, I believe in some other things that we would say, well, yeah, they're deeply held, but they're not about ultimate concerns, right? Life, death, salvation, some things like that. So deeply held beliefs, we'd probably say, they border on what we call religious. Anything else that you can think of what makes something a religious belief?
Well, Google says that religion is the belief in and worship of a superhuman controlling power, especially a personal god or gods.
And that's why Google's wrong. Because there are about 900 million Buddhists in the world, and many of them would classify as atheistic because gods have nothing to do with it. But what we now Google is Buddhism a religion? Yeah, Buddhism is a religion, right? Because this notion of religion being about God or gods is heavily shaped by the fact that it was Western scholars that started the academic study of religion, and they're coming from that influence of Christianity. Now, certainly I believe, as a Christian, it's very important that you have a relationship, a connection to God. But in thinking about what classifies as religious, once we start pushing on some of these things, it becomes a little bit more complex. I mean, should the United States recognize Pastafarianism as a religion, governmentally? Should the United States recognize the Church of Satan as a religion, the government? Yeah, I mean, because, again, it's the same kind of thing. The Church of Satan, they are not Satan worshipers. Right? Most of them are atheists. The whole point, again, of developing a Church of Satan is a critique on religion and the influence of religion. So if you want a Ten Commandments monument in your courthouse, we also want to be able to put a monument to Satan because of the separation of church and state.
One case that happened about a month ago where that happened. And what eventually occurred was the city took down the Church of Satan thing, but let the Christian thing in place.
Yeah, and at some point that'll make its way to the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court has to decide, right, does this classify as religion? And again, that raises another question: do we really want the Supreme Court deciding what constitutes what's religious or not? And so it's a very kind of complex thing. We think you probably all came in here. Sure, you had an idea about religion, what religion was, but once you start kind of picking at it, it becomes a little bit more complicated. Again, that's not to say these things are true, right? In the sense of, I think, if you want to be a Pastafarian, go ahead. I don't think that. I would love for everyone in the world to be a Christian, right? Because I believe Jesus is the Son of God. I believe that He is the only way. But then we also have, especially in the United States, this aspect of separation of church and state and some other things. And so we run the situation of the government having to make some of these decisions. And so, if we want rights for Christianity,
There's a lot of rights for every other quote-unquote religion.
but then how far does that extend? Right? Do we have to extend it to somebody just saying, well, this is my religion, right? And so now you get a tax break, right? You're now a 503c nonprofit organization, and so it becomes a very complex issue. Once we get out of church and our own personal religion and think about how this impacts the society that we live in, the world that we live in. So these ideas of ultimate concern, notions of the supernatural, the divine, something special, it's a good place to kind of start to think about, okay, how am I categorizing a certain aspect of existence as religion? Well, then we come now to another question, and that is, what do we study? So we have a general idea of, this is what we're looking for when we're talking about religion. All right. Hopefully the font will change, but we'll see. So, what do we study? What do we look for? Where do we find religion? In what things, practices, ideas do we find the religious?
Maybe like social situations put together.
Oh, that's what happened. This is one of those things about how well the Blackboard works all the time, right? All right, well, I'm sorry. We'll have to go with it being small. Social situations, right? How people interact with each other. What else do we study?
Maybe the history of such.
Okay. Taking a look at the history, how they developed, how they changed.
Psychological effects.
Okay. Different schools of thought or different approaches to a text or something else. Okay. I don't know why there's a space between the M and the E, but
Also cultural effects.
what kind of effect do they have on society? What else?
On a smaller scale, like how families are run and marriages.
What else?
Deity. Again, what is it that they?
Yeah. Who are the gods? What do they do? How do they interact with human beings? Which ones? In some cases where there's a plurality, right? Where there's polytheism, which ones are more important? Which ones are less important? What else?
I feel like what they believe about the supernatural that's like equivalent to human, not a divine power.
Okay. Think about natural world, conceptions about the world around us. What else?
Maybe their rituals.
Okay. What do they do? How do they do it? What else?
Multiple religions have a certain text that they go by.
Texts.
Prophets or patriarchs, people that are heads of the religion that are alive.
Places of worship.
How they worship.
What else?
Marriage.
We got What else?
Maybe how they influence the world around them.
And then also the alternative. How have they been influenced? Right? So how have they influenced? How have they been influenced? What else?
Evangelism.
Okay. And that, that kind of there's a variety of ways you can go with that. Thinking about how to approach someone from another religion, or how does that religion go about spreading their message. I mean, there are some religions that aren't evangelistic. They're not seeking to, I mean, they're glad to welcome people, but they're not actively outgoing, trying to convince people to become part of their religion. What else?
Some religions take a violent approach to spreading materials and self-helpers.
What's their approach to violence, or what kind of violence has existed in the history, or the alternative, thinking about nonviolence?
What they believe about good and evil in the world.
What else?
Whether they are created to change the individual in the state.
All right. What else?
Their views on secular events and people.
What else? A couple others that I had, symbols. What other symbols? And symbols, of course, can be very broad. It doesn't just have to be, a cross, a crescent, a Star of David. But what are the things that function symbolically in their in the practice of religion? With that, right, religious objects. How is that object used? What is it believed to be? Foodways. That could include, something like communion, right? The eating as a part of a religion, or foods being offered to a Hindu deity, and then a common meal kind of established there as well as thinking about, for example, kosher laws in Judaism, right? Certain foods are acceptable, certain foods are not acceptable, right? So food can be a way to think about religion. Well, we talked a little bit about it, but art, architecture, music, poetry, how it functions, how it's conceived, what's been done, and thinking about the structure of a building. What does that reflect? Why this building versus that building? Then we can also get into things like issues about class, gender, even age. How do they understand these things? How do they talk about them? Right. Some other things we can talk about is economics, other things as well.